around the nation. TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. TGIF, man. It's Friday. Welcome to the show. We're going to have a fun Friday show for you guys today, including is Donald Trump getting ready to ditch Pence? Ooh, drama. Lots and lots of drama on that. Actually, there's a lot of drama on this show as well. So we got that. Then we're going to talk about Trump supporters not so happy with placement of the wall. Do you taste that delicious Schadenfreude? Yeah, I do. So good. We'll talk about that story. You can tell I'm excited. Then we have Whoopi Goldberg actually defending Bernie Sanders. I know this is after she. Okay, so look, I got opinions about Whoopi Goldberg. I will always love her as Guinan on Star Trek: The Next Generation, but the way that she's treated Bernie Sanders and Justice Democrats, not good, right? But this might be a slight bit of redemption. So I'm actually going to give her some credit on this because look, it shouldn't be like a defensible, like a point that you have to defend. And again, I'm going to not get too much into it, but the fact that he is being attacked for this issue, for saying what he said during the town hall, it is absolutely ridiculous, and I called it. So, look, I'll get more into that in detail when we do the segment, but I told you, Bernie Sanders in the crosshairs. And not just of the DNC this time. All right. Then we have a story of surprise corruption. This time, on the Democratic side, again, not a shocker, but you never believe who is funding the Progressive Policy Institute. So, if you're unfamiliar, Progressive Policy Institute is linked to Third Way. So, yeah, I don't know if I gave away too much on that one, but and then we have another exit from the presidential race, sort of, if you could even say that he was in it, but we're going to talk about that as well. All right, so that's what we've got here. Going to have a decent Friday show, I think. Thanks to you guys. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Make sure to put in your comments and stuff. I like reading those during the breaks. And also, if you have a buck, super chat, because I read those first. Those are priority. Then it goes member comments, and then it goes everybody else. So I want to make sure to get some decent comments here if we got time. Speaking of people who support the show, I want to thank some patrons. So I want to thank Dorothy Zink, George Torres, Howard Chen, Janet Eason, Jasper Grayson, and John Murphy. These are all super members. You can become a super member on Patreon for $10, and that just means that you're like that you're more of a, I don't know. I'm trying to find the right words here, but you're a much more generous donor and someone who really is supporting the show and helping the show a great deal. Because you don't have to give $10. You could give less if you wanted to. And there's a lot of people who do. You only give $1. But the $10 super members, you guys are incredibly special because you give a lot more than most. And it's much appreciated. And it really helps me continue to do the show. So special shout out to the super members that I've been, whose names I've been reading off the last couple of days. Okay. Anyway. You can tell I'm kind of tired today. I'm a bit out of it. All right. So now let's move on. Let's get into the stories. There appears to be a little bit of tension between the president and his vice president. So there's been a rumor, a couple of rumors, some reports going on about a little bit of tension, which might even end up in the removal of Mike Pence from the 2020 ticket. Now, look, again, the reports go into, that's it's fairly unlikely, but this tension is enough for at least for Trump to start asking that question. So that's interesting. So now what's interesting about that is the timing as well. So according to the report, for at least a few months, or no, not just a few months, more than a few months, ever since 2018, where Republicans got basically crushed by the Democratic blue wave, you've had Trump thinking, I might be in a little bit of trouble. Uh-oh. And of course, here you have Mike Pence doing everything he can to try to stay on the ticket because Pence might have his own ambitions, which feed into this. So now Pence, of course, is like, oh, no, I'm not doing it. I don't have any ambitions. I'm here to serve the president of the United States. In fact, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to visit Dunebird in Ireland at one of Donald Trump's resorts. Now, that is about 100 miles away from where I'm supposed to be, but I'm staying in Donald Trump resort, and it's a wonderful, excellent resort. I love staying there and spending taxpayer money there that goes right into Donald Trump's pocket. But anyway, let me give you some context here, because this is an amazing story. Behind the scenes, tensions have been mounting among Trump, Pence, and their top advisors since the GOP's losses in the 2018 midterms. In the weeks afterwards, Trump asked aides about replacing Mike Pence on the ticket. Now, that's a big story. If true, huge. And he asked again for their thoughts on Pence during his August vacation at his golf course in Bedminster, New Jersey. According to Trump advisors who spoke in the condition of anonymity to talk about private discussions with the president. So there's this first 2018, there were talks like, man, Mike Pence. Oof, I don't know about this guy, right? I don't know about Mike. Mike's kind of worrying me a little bit. I don't know if I should go with Mike Pence or not. Well, okay, look, if you're not with Mike Pence, then who would you actually put a ticket with? The word is actually Nikki Haley. Now, that's a very interesting choice, and I'm going to get into the details of why and who is actually pushing that choice. Because it's not just Donald Trump on his own. Because, of course, right? So now, Nikki Haley, very interesting. So the word is that basically they were looking for someone, a woman, to be on the ticket with Donald Trump. Now, whose idea does that sound like? Now, if you guessed Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump, you would be 100% correct. Apparently, they want Nikki Haley so that she can help Donald Trump win back the suburbs in 2020. And of course, it's Kushner and Ivanka. They've been trying to build themselves as power brokers in Washington, right? Now, that's basically what their actual job has been, is to basically weed out anybody who's not loyal enough to the Trumps, to them specifically, and to try to position themselves as kingmakers, right? So I asked what they actually do. They're informal advisors, right, to the president. But in reality, this is what they're doing, right? And look, they've been actually part of some of the, fairly big departures. In fact, you had Reince Priebus, as well as former Chief of Staff Steve Bannon. So now, I despise Steve Bannon. I'm glad he's gone, but still, that was orchestrated by Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump. So here's Kushner and Ivanka deciding basically who can stay and pushing out people that they don't like. I think there was also, maybe they pushed out Scaramucci, or was it Lewandowski? Oh, maybe both. So anyway, what's going on there is a very interesting dynamic. Okay, so not only that, but Kushner and Ivanka, as well as campaign manager Brad Parscale, have apparently sidelined Vice President Pence's top political aides in the re-election campaign, according to Trump campaign advisors. So now you have the three of them, the campaign advisor, Parscale, teaming up and saying, we're going to sideline these guys because we might not have them on the ticket. More intrigue. Awesome. A Pence advisor also noted that they have had some trouble working with Trump's campaign over the past year. So now these rumors are very worrisome towards the vice president's camp, right? According to Trump and Pence campaign advisors who spoke on background for the story. So now, what's the White House saying? Well, they're saying nothing here. Pence and Trump get along beautifully. The teams get along beautifully. That well-oiled machine, and any word of dissension is, quote, fake news. Oh, it's 100% real. It's happening. You know it's happening. You know they're at least having these discussions. That doesn't mean Pence is going to be kicked off the ticket, but it does mean that there are people that are having this conversation and that Pence is probably trying to hold on for dear life. How many times have we seen this before? Fake news, fake news, fake news. Oh, and guess what? It keeps happening. It keeps happening. It keeps happening. Whenever he says fake news, it's not fake news. So that's interesting. So now here's more of what's allegedly being said. The perception is that Pence's team is difficult to work with, said one Trump advisor. So they're having a hard time working with each other. The advisor also noted that in his talks with Trump, the president has occasionally asked what the advisor thinks of Pence and his aides, as I mentioned earlier. That just doesn't come up organically. Somebody is saying that to the president, and that would be Jared and Ivanka. There are certain pockets out there, according to a Pence advisor, that want to solve their problems by replacing the running mate. The Pence advisor also noted that Trump would automatically keep the support of transactional evangelicals, televangelists like John Hagee and Jerry Falwell Jr., heir to the moral majority founded by his father. But Pence is essential to keeping quiet, less political evangelical voters in the fold for Trump. And of course, look, that's the reason why Pence was on the ticket in the first place, because he appeals to evangelicals. And so, again, there's a big section of evangelicals that will go with Trump no matter what. But Mike Pence, he's keeping the other guys in line and saying, "Oh no. So I'm the one that's keeping Trump in check with his morality, ha ha ha, and I'm the one that look, you're gonna vote for Trump and Pence. I'm here, and it's that's why you're gonna vote for me." I mean, essentially, he's got the support of evangelicals because he is one of them. So now, what's interesting is the admission, right, that this is all about keeping a certain section of the evangelical vote. In fact, Trump says this: I think Mike Pence has been an outstanding VP. I think that he's been incredible in terms of the love that a lot of people, especially if you look at the evangelicals and so many others, they really have a great respect for the vice president. And so do I, and so do I think most people. Okay. Another quote here from an RNC member, by the way, that kind of disputes that as far as all the love. This RNC member who helped secure Pence's place in the Trump ticket in 2016 and is fighting for him to stay there in 2020 said that, quote, Pence is on a tightrope. If he takes Mike Pence off the ticket, that would be just despicable. The RNC member also added that Pence's team appears worried that the relationship with the president, people come into the VP's office trying to find out what's going on with Trump, and he can't give them an answer. So now it gets to the most interesting part about this. Why are they even beefing in the first place? Again, it seems like, look, he gets the evangelical vote, and the quieter evangelicals with Mike Pence. And then Mike Pence, of course, gets to stay quiet and basically stay in his lane and worry about things on a more spiritual level, right? Well, the tension is from, let me go to one former advisor to Trump and Pence, said that Trump would more warmly embrace the vice president in public if Pence simply announced that he wasn't planning a run for president. Trump, the former advisor noted, hates aides who display more ambition than him. He said all this would go away if he announced he wasn't running for president in 2024. Not 2020, 2024. Donald Trump can't run in 2024. I mean, if he were to win 2020, then he would not be able to run 20. Now, if he were to lose 2020, then he would be open to running in 2024, sure. Assuming he still has his mental faculties at that point. But look, and I'm not trying to be ageist there. It's just, come on, his mental state is deteriorating in real time as we speak. So that's why I put that out there. But look, if he wins in 2020, then he can't run in 2024. Why does he care about Pence? Maybe if he's trying to run in 2024, if he loses 2020, then that might make a little sense. But at the same time, he's your vice president now, and normally it's pretty normal for a vice president to try to run for re-election after the president. I mean, look at Biden. I mean, Biden, sure, he didn't run in 2016 because of the death of his son, Beau Biden, from cancer. So I totally understand that. But come on. He wants, basically, I think what Trump wants is, again, for Pence to have no ambition for office whatsoever and to promise that he will not run for president basically ever. And why would that be? Either he wants to run himself for a third term or do the other scenarios that I mentioned. And by the way, he's joked about running for a third term. And that's despite it being illegal, but Donald Trump breaks laws all the time, so he doesn't actually care. Or more importantly, he wants Don Jr. or Ivanka to run in 2024. Now, can you imagine? That's not outside the realm of possibility. So, that's interesting. If it's true, and he ends up kicking Pence off the ticket, that would be, for one, I think, not good for his campaign, because he would lose a certain section of evangelical support that he desperately needs right now. And he wouldn't get some of these suburban voters that Nikki Haley would promise to bring in, because it's still Donald Trump on the top of the ticket. But look, even if he tries to do so, it's going to be harmful. But it would be just another casualty of Donald Trump's massive, massive ego. And it really is telling about who this guy really is. Okay. All right. Let's move on. All right. So President Trump is in quite a bit of hurry to finish his wall before the election. Now, at this point, it's not really much of a wall, more like replacement fencing, although he is, one of the big plans is to build 30-foot tall steel fencing. Okay. So now the president, in order to fund this steel fencing, which, by the way, has to have spikes on it and painted black. I'm not kidding. I did a report on that last week. He is taking money from different places in order to pay for the wall, since Congress will not appropriate the funds themselves. So now the latest bit of money would come from the military. Defense Secretary Mark Esper notified members of Congress earlier this week that he would take about $3.6 billion from military construction projects to build 175 more miles of wall along the border with Mexico. Now, a lot of projects, again, you might think, oh, good, take it from the military. They don't need it, right? Well, oh, look, when you're talking about bombing brown people in Afghanistan and Iraq, sure, absolutely. Or supporting actions in Yemen, totally. But this money actually is for local projects. Let me give you an example. One of them would be a new school on an army base, Fort Campbell. So Fort Campbell was supposed to get from this funding a new middle school. Donald Trump says, nope, I'm going to take that money. So let me give you the conditions inside the school, right? Now, 552 students in 6th, 7th, and 8th grades will now have to cram into classrooms that are over 30 people to a room and classrooms within classrooms. Now, I know it sounds amazing, right? You got a classroom and a classroom, which means you've got people overlapping each other on lessons, even different grades. I mean, it's complete and utter insanity. That's really hard to learn. So you have that. You also have heating and cooling issues. Sometimes these rooms are too hot. Sometimes they're too cold, depending on if the AC or the heater is working correctly. Leaking roofs. Look, the school is an absolute disaster. They needed a new middle school, but Trump took the money and said, no, I'm going to use it to keep brown people out. So, also, again, he could build his ridiculous vanity wall in order to get points from from sections of his incredibly racist base. So now, what's interesting about this story is there are residents in some of the areas where they're planning to build these sections of fence that actually don't want it. Now, let me give an example. Texas resident Shirley Menard. Now, she said she reluctantly voted for Trump in 2016. She got a letter back in July that saying that the federal government plans to build a 30-foot tall barrier right in her backyard. Oops. Right in her backyard. Now, she said, she told the New York Times, quote, I never thought they'd go through a subdivision. My blood pressure has not been normal since I got that letter. Well, I can imagine seeing a giant, eventually seeing a giant wall cut through your backyard. I'm guessing she's part of the NIMBY crowd. In this case, I guess I don't blame her. Now, not only that, but other residents in the border town of Brownsville, Texas, have been surprised to learn that Trump's wall will actually divide the local River Bend Resort and Golf Club. Now, that's not a country club. It's a living community for older adults. That wall would cut it right in half. In fact, the Times reports that about 70% of the community, some 200 properties, would be stranded south of the barricade, but north of the river, the Rio Grande. Riverbend resident Jerry Olson tells the Times that the plan for the wall are, quote, throwing an upheaval onto us while adding that none of us at our age need the additional stress. It's throwing an upheaval onto us. We're upheaved. Despite being upheaved and stressed out, Olson says, I might still vote for Trump. That's amazing. That's super amazing. Oh, you know what? This wall, terrible idea. Ooh, upheaving our community. If only they were to put it in a different place. But I still will vote for Trump. Wow. Now, there's one person in this report, Avi Greenslit, who says, look, I voted for Trump in 2016. But what's going on in my community, well, that's making me not vote for Donald Trump. In fact, she said he's not going to get my vote in 2020. I guess building a wall isn't such a great thing when it affects you, is it? Again, every one of these people profiled who voted for Donald Trump, even reluctantly, they knew what they were voting for. She could have voted for Jill Stein. Better than a vote for Trump, right? Much better than a vote for Trump. And so, look, she still voted for him, and that's what she gets. Now that it, of course, and I love the attitude. Now that it's negatively affecting them, suddenly they're shocked. Like, oh my God, this is not what I voted for. No, it was. It was. You voted to have Donald Trump build this ridiculous vanity wall to keep the brown people out, who, by the way, walked thousands of miles running from literal death, going through the desert in order to get here to try to have a piece of the American dream. You're mad that you have a wall in your backyard. Compare your situation to theirs. I have no sympathy. That's why I have no sympathy. And I'm sure a lot of you who are watching this, you probably don't either. This comes back to people basically not having any sort of empathy unless it affects them personally. We've seen it with the farmers, we've seen it with the truckers, and now with some of these people in border towns who are like, oh my God, I didn't think he was actually serious. No, he was serious. And now he's double serious because his economy is flailing and his poll numbers are disastrous. But no, you voters, you were so eager to try to keep out the others that you're hurting yourselves. And now you've got the audacity to complain. Well, forgive us if we don't feel sorry for you. We warned you. We told you this was going to happen. But in the end of the day, you made your bed. And now it's time for you to lie in it. Okay. So I'm going to take a break. I'll come back, take some super chats if there are any, read some comments, and then we'll talk about the view. So stay right here. We'll be right back around the nation. Welcome back to the show. Run the Nation right here. Keyword Nation. Jeff Walter here with you. Got a super chat here from Jonathan Scott. Says, I could see Trump trying to have multiple vice presidents to appeal to both evangelicals and suburban white women. Pence could be VP of Religious Affairs, and Haley could be VP of Privatization. Can you even have multiple vice presidents? I don't know, man. But I could imagine him thinking that he could do that. Sure. Thank you for the super chat, by the way. It's an interesting thought. Member Sarge Tech says, Trump supporters wanted brown people cut off from America. Trump will take your land and you better like it. He's your president. That's what they tell us all the time. He's your president. He's your president. Doesn't mean you have to like him. Also, Obama was your president before. They always got mad at that, though. Valerie Valoy disagrees with me a little bit. She says, I have empathy for these old folks. They are old and scared and ignorant, and they need to be taken care of from themselves. Look, when you're looking at the adult community that's being cut in half, okay, you can make the argument that, yeah, they're older people, but not all Trump supporters are older people. And you have to remember that. There are a lot of younger people. There's even a lot of millennials, or a decent chunk of millennials, and people in their 40s, 50s, etc., that are Trump supporters. It's not that they're old, and I mean, yes, there is an ignorance when it comes to the facts, of course, right? And okay, they are scared. A lot of them are scared of brown people and things like that. At the same time, it's not. I don't think they're really victims. I think they like to play victim, but I think it's rooted in white supremacy. And rooted in racism and bigotry. It's not economic anxiety, as some people would point out. It's not that. There is racial anxiety from these people, and they are ignorant. But at the same time, I don't know. I don't have an empathy for them right now. And maybe that makes me a bad person, or maybe that just makes you a much better person than I am. I don't know. But right now, I'm just not feeling it. All right. So thank you for your super chats as well as comments. So let's go into let's go to the View, because that's where everyone wants to go. The View. So during the climate debate earlier this week, Senator Bernie Sanders was asked a question about population control in the context of fighting climate change. So his answer, let's empower women and girls to make choices, to make their own choices in regards to family planning. Now, I talked about that yesterday. I actually broke down why the question itself was flawed, despite his answer being perfectly fine. And I also said that this is something that conservatives will attack him on. And of course, immediately it happened. On The View, host Meghan McCain accused the Jewish senator of supporting eugenics. Let's take a look.
Population growth is on the decline. The world's population is projected to nearly stop growing by the end of this century. And in all clarity, I think people know this, but S.E. Cupp is one of my closest friends, and I agreed with that. We were actually texting each other when this moment happened in the climate change debate, because I do think anytime you're talking about population control, if you're a pro-life person, it starts sounding alarms. Because again, like in China, they enacted a one-child policy, and now men outnumber women by 70 million in China and India. But I think for me, when you're talking about, when you're talking about,
one of them is my sister, by the way, who was left on the street at 2 months old.
No,
but Meghan, to your point, though, it's to your point. It's scary what happens when you do that.
This is not eugenics. Well, that's the thing. So you and Essie were.
I believe it's a slippery slope towards that. And I do think this dystopian, hellhole, nightmarish hellscape that Democrats are putting out, that climate change is just going to end everything, to the fact that we're going to have population control in this country, seems very extreme.
That's not what he's doing. That's an absolute twisting of what he actually said. He said nothing about, we're going to force the government to put in population controls, force people to have only a one-child policy like China. No, 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 no. If you actually listen to what he says, I want to empower women to make choices. You know, allow them to make the choice in how many children they have, not just here in America, but all over. In fact, you know what? I'm just going to let him explain it.
The answer has everything to do with the fact that women in the United States of America, by the way, have a right to control their own bodies and make reproductive decisions. And the Mexico City Agreement, which denies American aid to those organizations around the world that allow women to have abortions or even get involved in birth control, to me is totally absurd. So I think, especially in poor countries around the world, where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies, and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have, something I very, very strongly support.
There was literally nothing wrong with that answer. Again, nothing about forcing people into population control or anything like that, and making sure that we forcibly abort. Because again, you listen to what SE Cup and what Meghan McCain are saying. Oh, it's alarm bells because it's a slippery slope to leading to China and all this stuff, and it's going to be a horrible and the dystopian hellscape that they're talking about when it comes to climate change. I mean, that kind of rhetoric is just leading to extreme. No. It's absolutely ridiculous. All he talked about is expanding access to choice. Now, interestingly enough, Whoopi Goldberg, right? So Whoopi Goldberg is not a defender of Bernie Sanders, generally, right? In fact, you can go back just recently when Bernie Sanders was on The View, and she was confused, like, why don't you do something about Amazon? Bernie Sanders, pretty much, along with activists, was one of the only politicians that got Amazon to raise their minimum wage to $15 an hour. He authored the Stop Bezos Act. And he's got another one out there, I think, just called the Bezos Act. But why don't you do something about Whoopi, why don't you actually learn what he does? Why don't you actually read into what he's been doing? And don't read, hit pieces in the Washington Post by Jennifer Rubin, okay? Don't read the hit pieces in the New York Times, okay? Actually look at some of the bills that he's done. He's got a website for his the Senate office, right? You can go and look in there, and it shows what he's done. He's got a website that shows what he wants to do. It's really easy, and not only that, but she's had issues with Justice Democrats, which I think is ridiculous, AOC, etc. So I've criticized her on those, but on this, Whoopi Goldberg is going to have a spectacular defense of what Bernie Sanders said here. Let's take a look.
But here's the thing. Whatever he has said, let's be clear about what he is saying. Yeah. Let's not make something up when it's not what he said. Because when you bring in eugenics, that's a different conversation. Yeah. That is the controlling of a population because you don't like the size of your nose, or they're too dark, or they have or their eyes aren't blue.
But it also disproportionately impacts minorities and people with disabilities.
Eugenics doesn't have anything to do with minorities or anybody else. And I will say this to you also. Think about all the women in Ireland who for years just wanted birth control. They just wanted birth control because they live in a Catholic country that said you cannot have it. They were having an insane amount of children. Yeah. What these women fought for and pressed for and marched for was the right to make that decision for themselves. Yeah. I think that's clearly, and maybe I misinterpreted it, but when he says, I think especially in poor countries around the world where women do not necessarily want to have large numbers of babies, and where they can have the opportunity through birth control to control the number of kids they have, that's something I support. That's different than eugenics.
No, she didn't misinterpret it at all. That's exactly what he said. And so she's right. Now, what Whoopi Goldberg heard was what normal people hear. But Meghan McCain is going to go on after that to say, that she hears Sanders when he says these things through the prism of a conservative. Oh, okay. So the prism of basically fear and loathing. I got you. Uh, yes, I look. I can imagine from a conservative's perspective how women having bodily autonomy would be super scary. Oh my God, they can make their own choices. Oh, and how many children they have? No, no. Especially for a lot of these white conservatives, people who subscribe to replacement theory. I'm not saying Meghan McCain subscribes to that, but I'm saying that there's a lot of these white conservative politicians, people like Steve King, who talks about, oh, we're being replaced, so we need to have more babies. White people need to have more babies, right? That's like the issue when you start talking about overpopulation or population with conservatives. That's why she brings up the actually population is falling. Well, look, in a lot of modern industrialized countries, you do have lower population rates generally because people are more educated, they have more choices, and they choose to have less children. And that's fine. That's a choice of what they want. Now, in Japan, is a little bit of an issue when you take it to a little bit more of an extreme where people are not having enough children to replace the current generation. That causes lots of problems when it comes to the social safety net systems, retirement, etc. But that's not what's happening here in America. So, and again, I addressed the whole climate thing. Look, climate. So, look, there's 71% of all emissions are created not by people having kids and personal choices. No, they're made by giant corporations. Okay. Now, family planning is a wonderful thing, but that is not the key to fighting climate change. Family planning is just allowing women to be able to make their own choices with their own bodies. Every person should be in favor of that. Every person should be in favor of that. Okay. But apparently not Meghan McCain, or when it comes to making better choices in order to protect the environment. As I said, that's not going to have a huge impact. Maybe it will have some impact, but again, until we deal with the 71% of all emissions created by these giant corporations that pollute and put out all this pollution and carbon and methane, then we're not really going to solve the problem. Now, why don't conservatives see that? Why don't they talk about that? No, it's because they don't want to. Conservative politicians, of course, get funded by these giant fossil fuel companies. That's why they don't want to talk about it, because they make money. But the conservative voter, now that's interesting. That's an interesting question. It's maybe they don't want to believe in the facts, right? They don't believe in the facts. Facts are an inconvenience when it comes to their feelings. And their feelings are, well, liberals believe in climate change. I hate liberals, so I guess I don't believe in climate change. I mean, isn't it amazing that there's reports out there where there are men, specifically white conservative men, right, that feel that climate change is a woman's issue, and I mean that by not like that it's a like a women's issue, like for example, equal pay or the cost of women's feminine products. No, it means in the context of it makes you girly to recycle. Like, oh, it's so feminine to care about the environment. That there are people that were polled that said that they would be embarrassed to bring in a reusable bag to go shopping with because they think that it makes you more feminine. That explains the attacks on Greta Thunberg, right? The incredible misogynistic, horrible attacks on these, women who are speaking out in favor of doing something against climate change. That's what you're seeing from a lot of white conservative men. And again, the facts are inconvenient to their feelings. And unfortunately, the science has a liberal bias. They refuse to see the emergency that is climate change and the fact that it's costing us big time already and that it will cost us much more in the future. So we do have to do something. Population control and family planning, they're not the way to do it, but family planning ultimately is a great thing to do. And I definitely encourage it. Access to abortion, access to birth control, and of course, the big thing, education. But if you want to tackle climate change, you got to go after the big polluters. You got to go after the big corporations, agribusiness, and do something. And luckily, there are presidential candidates that have plans on that. One of them happens to be Bernie Sanders with the Green New Deal. So we got to do those big solutions to prevent what she said, the dystopian hellhole, etc., future that we have waiting for us. Okay. All right. Moving on. One climate change related story to another. So by now, most of the Democratic candidates have released their plans to take on climate change. So now, if you rate some of the more progressive plans versus the least progressive plans, you'll have something that looks more like, here you have Bernie Sanders with the Green New Deal, Tulsi Gabbard with her support of this, what was the Stop Act. Might not be right on that one. But Elizabeth Warren also has a less progressive plan than Bernie Sanders or Tulsi Gabbard. However, still fairly progressive. And then going down the line, you've got technocratic solutions from people like Andrew Yang. And then basically at the end, at the most conservative, you have people like Joe Biden, who are going for a more centrist middle ground approach. You know, when he's not like plagiarizing from other people's plans. So now, if you're wondering why the establishment candidates are pushing middle of the road approaches to climate change at a time when most Democratic voters rank the environment and climate change at number 2, the second most important issue aside from healthcare that they're going to vote on this election, well, you'll be shocked to find out that it's not because voters want a middle ground approach. No, it's because the Democrats, these Democrats are getting funded by fossil fuel companies. Now, this is according to a new report in The Intercept. Now, the Progressive Policy Institute, note the irony in the name, right, is actually a centrist Democratic think tank. And they have received about $50,000 from ExxonMobil in 2018 via its parent organization, Third Way Foundation. And you guys know who Third Way is. So that's basically the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. So now, this is according to the oil giant's 2018 Worldwide Giving Report, in which they are giving worldwide in the form of carbon pollution. But anyway, oh no, this means money, to be fair. Now, PPI's director, Lindsay Lewis, defended her use of the money. She said it was for general support and that, quote, we only accept general support funding from corporate interests. We do not do paid for research or have any donor-run programs. Because as a think tank, you know, having donors pay for research, I mean, what do you think kind of research or, you know, programs or whatever paid for work ExxonMobil would have you do? Oh, maybe the kind of work that sheds doubt on climate change or sheds doubt on some of the solutions to climate change that have come out. Right. So now Lewis also said that this is the first time ExxonMobil had donated to the Third Way. Well, lucky for them that ExxonMobil decided to come around and be magnanimous like that. Now, my guess is, well, Exxon's like, we already bought all the Republicans, lock, stock, and barrel. We own the Republican Party. So I guess we're going to buy more Democrats now. We already have people like Joe Manchin. We already have people like Joe Biden. But, you know, we're going to buy some more and make sure that we can, you know, kind of stamp down on this resurgence of green environmentalism inside the Democratic activist base. Stop ideas, dangerous ideas, like the Green New Deal. Yeah, we got to stop that. And so here we have a situation where you have Third Way, this centrist think tank, taking all this money and giving it to a so-called progressive think tank. I know, right? It's a bastardization of the name progressive. Now, The Intercept also notes that PPI's new donor isn't really a dramatic shift from its normal fundraising records. For example, The Intercept's Akala Lacey had also found that the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, or PhRMA, has annually donated between $25,000 and $75,000 to Third Way since 2009, upping its donation to $265,000 in 2016 the same year that Medicare for All entered the national spotlight. By the way, Third Way, obviously, opposes Medicare for All, and so does the Progressive Policy Institute. But Medicare for All is progressive policy. Hilarious to see Progressive Policy Institute actually fight against progressive policy, but that's what they are. So obviously, pharma wants to derail Medicare for All, so they give to this group in order to push BS studies against it, to push BS messaging, and to fight against, any attempt to try to get us away from our multi-payer insurance system, right? Our broken insurance system. So, what pharma is doing for healthcare, Medicare for All, ExxonMobil is obviously doing for climate change. So now the report also noted that ExxonMobil, part of its giving, not only to turn us away from things like the Green New Deal and to have more quote unquote moderate solutions, because even ExxonMobil knows that, man, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're kind of going to get screwed. So we've got to do something just a little bit that won't hurt our profit margins. Yes, again, magnanimous of you, right? Now, they say that ExxonMobil is now softer on climate change than before. By the way, ExxonMobil was a company back in the 1970s that knew that climate change was a real thing, a real phenomenon. And what did they do? They decided that they would, of course, suppress that knowledge so they can make an extra buck. Now, The Intercept writes that rather than paying people to say that there's no problem at all, as they have traditionally done, ExxonMobil is looking to rebrand as a good faith actor in the climate fight with pay-ons to carbon capture technology, low carbon fuels, algae, carbon taxes that also conveniently exempt it from some lawsuits and regulations that it happens to be most worried about. Interesting, because you have, of course, a lot of cities that are suing ExxonMobil for the effects of climate change. Now, this, they say, will allow ExxonMobil to get credit for not denying the science anymore. I don't know about you, but ExxonMobil gets no credit. None at all. It's amazing that they're trying to do this. But even they're like, we got to do something because people know the truth, and they're pissed. Now, they're also trying to get, again, credit for not funding organizations that deny climate change or spread climate denialism anymore. Now, they still fund politicians, however. They don't fund groups. They don't fund the think tanks anymore, so they say. But they still fund politicians that openly deny climate change. For example, let me go back to the think tanks, right? Now, they say they don't fund think tanks, but they actually do. Manhattan Institute's a good example. Now, they received $970,200 from Exxon between 2008 and 2018. Now, the Manhattan Institute, again, is a right-wing think tank that has members that deny climate change. For example, MI senior fellow Robert Bryce. He said back in 2011 that science is not settled on climate change. Another MI senior fellow, Orrin Cass, last year authored a report arguing the potential costs of climate change are overblown, suggesting that many people prefer warmer temperatures and could adapt easily to global warming. That is not how that works. That is not how evolution works. I'm just saying. All right. In addition to Exxon, MI is funded by the Mercer Family Foundation. Rebecca Mercer, a key financier of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign, runs the foundation and sits on the MI board. This is still getting money from ExxonMobil. Exxon also continues to give large donations to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and remains a member of the American Petroleum Institute, each of which has fought hard against environmental regulations and climate measures. Now, there's another man that gets funded, and this is where the link between the PPI and ExxonMobil comes into play. Phil Goldberg. He is the director of PPI's Center for Civil Justice. He has fought against lawsuits brought by cities devastated by the effects of climate change, and by the way, the law firm that Goldberg is in it works for, right? He's a partner to this law firm. Also defended the tobacco industry in their denialism when it came between the link between smoking and cancer. So he has a history, and now he's working at PPI, the supposed progressive policy institute funded by Third Way, funded by ExxonMobil, to come out and defend ExxonMobil and oil companies against lawsuits. I mean, that's amazing. Goldberg is also a former lobbyist for the coal company Peabody Energy, who was brought on as a special counsel by the National Association of Manufacturers back in January of this year as part of its Manufacturers Accountability Project, or MAP. Now, that project was founded in 2017 to take on so-called activist litigation against big oil companies. ExxonMobil is a member of the National Association of Manufacturers, and the MAP project has been among the most active bodies fighting off climate-related legal action while also donating generously to climate denial groups over the years. Lewis said Goldberg works with PPI in a volunteer capacity only and is not employed by the Third Way Foundation. Oh, okay, so he's a volunteer. He's not getting paid for this. So I'm assuming that he's just, he just loves fossil fuels so much. He loves ExxonMobil so much, and these oil companies and these natural gas companies, that he just works for free in order to protect them from litigation, from the damage they cause through their emissions of methane and carbon into the atmosphere. Sure, nobody buys that. Nobody believes that. And you know what else nobody believes? How ExxonMobil is giving to Third Way and PPI because they care about rehabilitating their image when it comes to the climate. No. What they want to do is they want to fund politicians that will continue to do nothing about climate change. Now, look, on the Democratic side, there's a lot of big plans, but not everybody is serious about their plans. Again, you take somebody like Joe Biden, who talks about a middle ground approach, right? Who's literally been caught plagiarizing sections of people's plans. Do you think Joe Biden is going to be serious about fighting climate change? Look, if you're not serious about creating your own plan, then why would we ever think that you're serious about actually taking action and doing something bold? He even says, no, we're not going to do anything bold. No, we're just going to do middle of the ground, middle of the road. We're going to be friendly towards these corporations, which emit 71% of the emissions in this country, and we're gonna do that middle ground, and we're gonna make sure we protect the corporations and their profit motives because they're important. No. What we need to do in the climate is something bold. Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders have two of the best plans that, by the way, complement each other. Those two plans work with each other. Bernie Sanders, the aspirational plans, right? Big and bold, and Tulsi Gabbard with the enforcement. These are good plans. And it would facilitate a rapid transition of our energy system away from fossil fuels, while also guaranteeing economic justice for people who happen to be displaced. No coal miner, no oil rig worker should be left behind by this progress. And through the Green New Deal, they won't be. That's the whole point. So if you're looking for someone who is going to do something that is needed when it comes to climate change, Joe Biden and centrist Democrats funded by Third Way and ridiculous think tanks like the Progressive Policy Institute aren't it. Okay. All right, one more. Former Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz, who has promised to run an incredibly unpopular independent campaign against Bernie Sanders if he wins the nomination, has apparently said, Never mind. Not doing that. Now, the reason is interesting. He says that he doesn't want to run an independent campaign because he could be a spoiler for Joe Biden. Well, that's funny. I wasn't aware that Joe Biden had already locked this thing up. News to me, man. Maybe he knows something that we don't. Or maybe he's just trying to save face because, again, his campaign incredibly unpopular, even among centrist Democrats, by the way. Now, what's funny also is as I got to ask, was this decision made before or after Joe Biden's eye exploded on stage? Or the 90 different gaffes that he's made in the last few days on his recent campaign stops? Or amid the speculation about Joe's mental health, based on the fact that sometimes he seems like he's incredibly confused and lost, and other times overloaded with stress? I don't know. But apparently Schultz maybe thinks, I don't know, he's got it, and I don't want to spoil him against Donald Trump. It's funny because when Bernie Sanders was leading in the polls, as Joe Biden is now, which, by the way, Bernie's catching up, when Bernie Sanders was leading, this is when Howard Schultz was thinking, I'm going to jump in the race. Why? Because he wanted to stop Bernie Sanders. Which, of course, I've said it before, and it still rings true. People like that would rather have Donald Trump for 4 years than actually have a real progressive elected. And with Biden, of course, he would get somebody who's essentially a true moderate Republican who won't raise Howard Schultz taxes. Now, just because he's dropping out, by the way, that doesn't mean Schultz is leaving politics or taking his money with him. Oh, no. He's got a plan for his money. Axios reports that he originally planned to spend about over $100 million on 2020 on his election campaign, but now will direct that same amount over a longer time towards, quote, innovative efforts to reduce inequality and promote political reform. I wonder what that's going to turn out to be. Now, in a letter to what I would assume to be his 12 followers, Schultz writes this: the money that I was prepared to commit to a presidential campaign will instead be used to invest in people, organizations, and ideas that promote honesty, civility, and results in our politics. Okay, translation. Basically, he'll be giving money to centrist think tanks and centrist politicians that will go on to attack Bernie Sanders and other progressives. That's what this money will end up being used for. I mean, that's what it's about. He doesn't want a progressive in the White House because they will actually push for real, actual change. And look, Howard Schultz has done some good things. And I'm not going to completely gloss over that. He has done good things when he was CEO of Starbucks. But at the same time, he only wishes, like Biden, to return to the pre-Trump days where everything was so great and we had civility. But we still had all these economic issues. We still had, yes, actual economic anxiety, actual problems with student loan debt, we still have it now, that weren't being addressed by the administration that Joe Biden was a part of. There were still lots of problems, and I would argue that a lot of those problems did lead to the rise of Donald Trump. Howard Schultz didn't see those problems. Howard Schultz simply wants to return to civility. In the days where the Democrats had fallen asleep and corporations continued to do extremely well. Those are not the days we need to go back to. We need a progressive future, and we need to ignore people like Howard Schultz. I'm glad he's dropping out. He should have, I'm glad that he decided not to run and be a spoiler to Bernie Sanders. And all I got to say, at the end is just bye. Bye, Felicia. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. See ya. Okay. All right. That's it. That's what I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Please subscribe to the channel or consider becoming a patron. There's even merchandise. You'll find the link in the description as well. Or become a channel member. So lots of different ways that you can help the show, that you can support independent progressive media. We are funded solely by you guys. All right. Thank you guys. Love you. And remember, change begins with you. Have a good weekend, guys. We'll see you next week.